Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Destina. This is Spiritually Bougie Astrology, and we are going to take a very peculiar look at the South Node and Mars. And we're going to take a deep dive look into some of the activations that these two are going to be doing for us here in the next 2 months. Because there's a lot. I've been meditating on this for a while, and I was going to put part of this into the month ahead forecast for October, but the thing is, I recorded it. And in an hour and a half long recording, only 40 minutes of it was actually about the month of October. Everything else I went over was going to be about Mars and the South Node. And the thing is, not everybody gives a shit. And I know that. That's okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings. So my thought process is I want to just kind of do a bit of a rant. It is going to be a bit of a rant. I'll give more emphasis on some of the things that have happened already and how that's carrying into present energy that we're about to go into. And not just go into is like in the next week or two, but like going all the way into like January of this year, of next year, not this year, next year. So I want to go over a couple of different things. Now, for me to go over them, I have to kind of give a little bit of a backstory about myself and kind of explain something, and that is Dusty's weird. I'm weird. I was a weird kid. I had a situation come about that I came from two different intuitive lines. However, on my mother's side, the intuitive side was like dwindling away. The last one that had been intuitive was my great grandmother. My grandmother that had the bigger hand in raising me, I call her Toots. And Toots knew that her mom was intuitive, but she didn't know anything about anything. And so her biggest, advice to me, given the timeline, we're talking about the 80s now, 80s, early 90s, you got to keep that stuff to yourself, baby. Okay. I'm not going to argue. I'm 5, 6 years old. Grandma said keep it to yourself. Okay, but grandma didn't shame me. Just to be clear, it was very much like a knowledge of like, you're going to feel these things. I don't know how to help you with them. But at the same time, you can't tell everybody either. And I respect that mindset in a lot of ways. Now, because I didn't have anyone to teach me on the intuitive side, because growing up, I was only around my mom's side of the family. I didn't get to actually meet my dad's side of the family until I was an adult. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have anyone that could help me out. I didn't have somebody to lean into. I had to figure my shit out on my own. That's not easy to do. What does a Scorpio rising that wants to figure everything out do? Find every book and piece of information that you can and latch onto it. Over time, you start to realize these are okay. This is repetitive. This makes no sense at all. But it's all very, very helpful. I study different parts of the occult, different elements in regards to Wicca and everything else, paganism, different things tied to history. And then over time, what ended up making the most sense was the astrology. For somebody who is intuitive, the astrology can help you balance the energies that are affecting you. People that are intuitive, that are empathic, they're not just sensitive to the energy of somebody when they walk into the room. They're energetically sensitive to the transits. They're energetically sensitive to things that cannot easily be recognized. Learning the astrology made life a lot more bearable. Now, here again, I didn't have a teacher. I was a little country girl trying to find books in a small ass country town. Not an easy thing to do. So I didn't care what path it was, what form it was. If I could get my hands on it, I wanted it. Go to the old bookstores, find something random. I have books on my shelf that go from the 70s. That's not even a joke. When you have no path, which is a big way my life has gone, is not having a direct path, but creating a path, you dabble. You dabble in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of but you start to pull the things together that make the most sense to you. If somebody asks me, like, are you a Hellenistic, or are you a modern astrologer, or are you a Vedic astrologer? I'm intuitive. I'm an intuitive astrologer. I use my intuition and I use the tool and I put them together. Whatever sticks, whatever makes sense is the ones that I go with because I lean into my intuition. Anytime in the past that I haven't leaned into my intuition, the universe usually finds a way to smack my ass back down to reality, letting me know that's not what we told you to do. So I lean into my intuition. The reason I wanted to bring all that up is I wanted to have that as a precursor to kind of explain what I'm about to get into next whenever I go into the South Node. In Hellenistic astrology, modern astrology, and Vedic astrology, these tend to be the three that I tend to go forth. All of them can have similar aspects, but different aspects tied to the South Node. And with Hellenistic astrology, I feel like it's pretty basic. I don't feel like they put a whole lot of emphasis on the nodes. They put more planetary emphasis. Saturn rules everything. But on the flip side of that, there are the other paths. Now, with modern astrology, I want to talk a little bit more about it first. I feel like modern and Vedic give the most when it comes to the South Node. I promise all of this is going to make sense. You just got to stick with me for the ride. I love the formats of modern astrology whenever they talk about the North and the South Node because I'm looking at those ideas of soul path and soul growth and where we're meant to do things and how we're meant to evolve and how we're meant to heal and how we're meant to let things go and some of the energies from our past lives that we need to outgrow, recognizing the connections of karmic contracts when people come into your life. And I'm going to add a layer to that most people do not listen to. And I have to explain this to every single one of my clients. If you think you have a karmic contract with somebody or you're concerned about it, don't just look at their charts. Pay attention to when y'all started talking. Pay attention to when certain dates happen. It's the first thing I always ask my people. Okay, when did you meet? When did you actually become an item? Because these are usually not the same thing. By understanding that, you can understand if there was a past life connection in the transits that got activated that's not easily recognizable in the natal charts. There are layers to astrology. You're going to hear me mention layers a couple of times. That's one example. Moving on. That was a tangent. I'll keep going. When it comes to elements tied to the South Node in modern astrology, a lot of it has to do with karma and past life, and I agree with all of it. Stephen Forrest did a great job in the things that he got in his intuitive downloads. He's very much an intuitive astrologer, and he created his own path, and many of us know it now. Most people are more familiar with modern astrology than they are traditional aspects. That's okay. Dusty dabbles. Dusty dabbles in everything. So, with that mindset, now I want to talk about Vedic astrology. Because the layers in Vedic astrology with the South Node are so much deeper. And when it comes to transits, the lessons in Vedic astrology tied to the nodes, far more accurate. Far more accurate. And that's why you'll hear me say things in the forecast of like, hey, if we have these transits that hit the South Nodes, the only one we've had for a long time has been the moon, just to be clear. But we're about to have a whole other set of them in October. Another one in November, but the majority of this is going to be in October. And I want to now kind of get into elements of that. But before I do, I want to talk about Mars. So we're going to pin a pin in the South Node. Vedic South Node astrology. We're going to put a pin in this because we got to come back. I need to explain something else first. They will tie together, I promise you. So, in early June, we had the Sagittarius full moon, and I had downloads then. And for those that need like a recognition of what do we mean when we say downloads, think visions. I just don't like to use the word visions. It has other inclinations to it, and I don't. Downloads is like a more modern way to say visions. Got some downloads. I'm in meditation. I'm meditating on that full moon, and I'm sitting on the back patio. Got my dogs in the garden, and what came through at that time was Mars conjunctions. Well, that seems very specific. If you go back, and I'll put the link in the description for that Sagittarius full moon that happened back then, just so you can hear what I said then if you need to. Some people don't care. That's fine. What I said then, Mars wasn't doing anything. And it really wasn't. There was nothing going on with Mars in that Sagittarius full moon. However, there was another set of planets that was doing something. Right after the Sagittarius full moon perfected, in the same 24-hour span, Mercury made a conjunction to Uranus. Here's the two planets we're going to talk about when it comes to Mars. Uranus and Mercury. What came through in that full moon download, Mars conjunctions. Very specific. So I looked. Now, I already knew the last Mars conjunction. I knew it because of where it hit in my natal chart. And that was Mars, Uranus, and the North Node, all at 18 degrees of Taurus. They had a triple shit show conjunction, and it happened right at the beginning of August. Right at the beginning. August 1st, August 2nd, that time frame. What was very interesting about that transit is after it happened, Uranus quit moving. Uranus spent half of July, all of August, all of September, and the first few weeks of October, all at 18 degrees. And in that time span, it reactivated the Saturn-Uranus square in a weird way. Usually whenever we go through timelines in our lives, and this only happens about once every 25 years? 22 to 25. I'm not doing my math right there. Saturn and Uranus will go through sets of squares. We will have another set that's going to happen in the 2040s. Let's do it that way. They tend to herald very specific timelines, but what I thought was very interesting is how Uranus, after that triple conjunction, froze. And after Saturn went back into its square, we started to see the innovative companies, the technological companies that had been doing so vastly well all through COVID and all through that timeline, suddenly started to dwindle. That's interesting to me. Now, there were other things that happened during that timeline too, and I'll happily put a link into the description. I watched another YouTuber during the Mars retrograde, but whenever I was listening to the dates, I'm like, oh, well, that ties back into this. This is what I'm talking about. And that we also had some very big breakthroughs. But where we had breakthroughs, ironically enough, was in a whole different sector where technology suddenly hit declines in regards to energy and fusion and AI and other forms of technology. We suddenly had productive, not release, because AI release stuff really came out earlier this year. But we had productive breakthroughs. We had big productive breakthroughs that fell into that timeline. And I bring all this up. This is a quick little tangent, I know. And I'll put a link into the cold fusion video that I watched about this. It really made me think that once we get into Uranus in Gemini, that we're going to have nuclear growth and nuclear expansion in a lot of ways, which would be one way to actually give us more clean air and less emissions, just to be clear. Because after the Mars-Uranus conjunction, Mars went into Gemini, had a whole retrograde, and that's when a lot of their testing and more knowledge and more breakthroughs and stuff started to come through. Their initial breakthrough led to a ripple effect of other things. So That's a quick little tangent on that. Uranus was the last planet Mars made a conjunction to, and we either had halts and stalls or we had breakthrough energy. It depended on where people were in what industries. During that Sagittarius full moon, Mercury and Uranus made a conjunction. The next conjunction, planetary. For this part of the conversation, we're talking planetary. There will be a Mars South Node conjunction at the beginning of October. That's getting its own little topics. That's why I said we're putting a pin in the South Node. So the next planetary conjunction with Mars is going to be Mercury. And it won't be one set of conjunctions between Mars and Mercury. In fact, there will be 3. The first one is going to happen at the end of October. It's actually going to happen right after the full moon in Taurus perfects. The full moon in Taurus is on October 28th. For me, on Central Standard Time, it will perfect on October 29th at 9:10 a.m. Again, Central Standard Time, because I'm in Oklahoma. The next one that will occur will be about 2 months later, and it's going to be right before Mercury retrograde ends, so this is going to be a fun holiday season. Will be on October 27th, and that's going to be in Sagittarius. The third and final Mars-Mercury conjunction will happen in Capricorn, and that's going to happen in January, between January 26th and January 27th, depending on your time zone. Those conjunctions feel like they are necessary to put things into play for whatever seeds were planted back in the early parts of June. Hey, if y'all ain't heard it yet, you should probably go back and listen to the September forecast. Was it the September one? No. It was the week ahead for September 4th to the 11th. I just remember Monday was September 4th. It was that week ahead forecast. I did a whole set of downloads that came through. This feels like it ties into that. So these are additional future dates. Okay. The first planetary conjunction that Mars will make will be to Mercury, and that has layers. It has layers because Mars was in Gemini for nearly 8 months. Mars entered Gemini August 21st, stayed in there until the end of March. I think it was March 22nd or the 26th. Mars changed signs first, so I'm pretty sure it was March 22nd, and then March 26th was when Pluto would change signs. I'm trying to do that part from memory. I didn't write that down. Apologize. Mars was in Mercury sign for quite some time. Then all this summer, Mars has been making way for everybody else. He's been working for everybody else. He made space in Leo for Venus. He made space and disrupted things. Disruptions. He disrupted things in Virgo and made space for Mercury. Now he's doing his trek through Libra, and once the sun goes into Libra, it's like he's making way for the sun while the sun goes through mutual reception with Venus. However, once we get to October, Mars, for the first time in nearly 2 years, is going to go into Scorpio. Yeah. The last time Mars was in Scorpio was December of 2021. Ah, shit. Dusty's talking about 2021 again. Yeah. December of 2021. The last Mars South Node conjunction happened in Sagittarius in December of 2021. There were seeds and activations planted during that time. The South Node entered Scorpio in January of 2022 and stayed there until July 17th of 2023. Y'all have heard me growl about that 17th week before. That part's going to be specific in more than one way as we get into October. Parts of that week in July will be coming back around in October. I've seen it. And when I do the full month ahead forecast, I'll go into that more. I will pull charts at the end of this little rant, but I want to just do the meditative rant. That's what I'm going to call it. The peculiar aspects of the South Node in my meditative rant before I do the chart. So I will do charts at the end, but it's going to be a quick thing because I'm just going to go from those backwards dates into the more present ones to kind of show those connections. Sorry. Morning. Still in my coffee. Okay. Mars was in Gemini for nearly 8 months while Mars was stationing retrograde. So at the 25-degree spinning mark, Mercury entered Scorpio. Throughout the eclipse season of late October into November, the majority of that, Mars was spinning at 25 degrees. Mars wasn't doing anything. Not directly. Mars was in mutual reception with Mercury. Mercury was in Mars's house, Mars was in Mercury's house. So a lot of Mercury's actions during eclipse season had a very Martian element to it. We were spinning, spiraling, discovering things, finding things, fighting about things, trying to get things set straight. In some aspects it was. In other aspects, there will be elements from last fall that are going to come back around in Scorpio season. So that's going to be both in October and November. Now, there were things that happened in the financial market. There were things that got released in the news. There were all sorts of disruptions that happened in that eclipse season. And the thing is, we had 18 months of eclipse points, which is only 3, but still, that occurred while the South Node was going through Scorpio. In the weeks ahead, Mars is going to enter its house for the first time in 2 years and take a look at what everybody else has done but him. And that's going to be very interesting. Now, the first planetary conjunction will be Mercury. However, there will be another conjunction ahead of that, and that's the one where I want to start to tie these things together. Let's go back to the South Node. We'll pull that pin out and let's do a little bit more emphasis on it and tie it to Mars and what I'm seeing coming through. This is why this is a rant. In Vedic astrology, the South Node is the body that was removed from the head of the dragon. The head of the dragon is the North Node. It is Rahu. It is a greedy, greedy baby. Gimme, gimme, gimme. This is what I want. I will have, I will own, I will control, I will devour. This is mine. Mine, mine, mine. Whatever. South Node. It is a body with no head. Well, then there's no overthinking, so there's that. But then there's the other elements too, whenever it comes to having a body that has been outgrown, removed, discarded. It had to be cut off. Cuts can be associated with the South Node. And this is according to Vedic astrology. I can link a Vedic astrologer that says these types of things. I can link one in the description. That will probably help. It's one that I actually like to listen to on occasion. So, there will be cuts, wounds, sacrifices, loss. And the closer Mars gets to the South Node, the closer we're going to get to things like that. Now, in all forms and paths and traditions of astrology, there are exaltations and detriments for planets. In Vedic astrology, even the nodes, which rule nothing, have exaltations. They have a detriment and an exaltation. In Vedic astrology, the South Node is said to be exalted in Scorpio. The South Node just spent 18 months in Scorpio. In Vedic astrology, the South Node is the more feminine aspects of Mars. Now, Mars has been a big burly man with a machete all summer. Y'all have heard me talk about that. We haven't actually put it in the idea of a feminine form. That would be the South Node. When I think of that, I think more femme fatale. It's sneaky. It's not easily seen. It's not easily noticeable. The nodes go in a retrograde pattern all the time. She doesn't follow the same rules as everyone else. She does her own thing. That can be dangerous. She makes her own rules. That can be dangerous. Now, there can be other aspects whenever it comes to cuts that aren't so harsh, and that would be surgeries. Surgeons can be associated with the South Node. Your BBL can be associated with the South Node. Tunk, tunk, tunk. There are other aspects too that has to do with psychology. It has to do with spirituality. It has to do with healers and seers and growth. I'm not really stuck on all of that. That's not where I'm at in my meditation. I'm not going to deny it. That's why I said those really fast. But the one that I started to get into, that I started to pick up on, and I had to spend part of yesterday, like going back through like audiobooks and physical books, like I'm looking for this connection. In Vedic astrology, and you got to remember, Vedic astrology is thousands of years old. And whenever it comes to the qualities of it, it has been the most intact compared to other formats. There's a reason so many more newer astrologers are having to go back over and find the old scripts and get it translated and everything else to rewrite it into English. Chris Brennan, who runs the Astrology podcast, he does that. But in Vedic astrology, it's written in Hindu, and Hindu is still a very, very active language. So it's different. I got puppies right here, by the way. It's more intact. The knowledge has been passed down more in longer ways. So with that in mind, I want to go into another element. Things tied to the South Node in Vedic astrology can also be about programming, putting something into an order. And I'm not talking about a Virgo aspect here. I'm talking about like building pulleys and systems, that kind of programming. Lightning. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back. Electrical shocks, major shocks to the system. Things that are below the surface that can come back. Things from the past, going back to that karmic past life thing, can come back through with South Node. But I really want to go onto that electric and that engineering. The reason I want to do that is because, again, we're talking about a very old format that doesn't always have the more up-to-date, verbiage. So I'm going to add some more up-to-date verbiage. Engineers tend to be innovative. They tend to build things. Very Martian. Builder, Martian. Innovative. Bright ideas, breakthroughs, inspiration tied to the South Node. But it's either the spiritual, meditative, vision-like inspiration, or it's figuring out how to get below the surface, get something to work, working out a kink. So sometimes when you hear programming, you can also think troubleshooting. There's a lot of troubleshooting with the South Node. But there is this other element with electric. And if I start to combine electric with engineering, innovation, electricity, lightning, well, that can start to go into technology. They certainly didn't have a word for technology back then. Technology, booms, growth, breakthroughs, as well as the breakups and the sudden loss and the sacrifice and well, if you start adding all of that together, it starts to sound very Uranian. Uranian. At least it does to me. You can put your own notes together and however you figure it out, it's up to you. If you're listening to me, you're listening to me for a reason. It starts to feel very Uranian. And that has been the element that I've been picking up on for weeks that I can't break out of. I've tried. I have my own personal South Node stories. I've had certain South Node conjunctions that they've been very triggering, and they show me like relationships that needed to go away and things that needed to break. I needed to break away from, and people I needed to quit being partners with. And I'm saying this in the business partnership, and I'm also saying this in the relationship sense. Uranus, there was a new moon opposite Uranus that happened, and it led to a passing. Like, I've seen it that way, but I also have my own Mars South Node conjunction little story, and that was the last one that happened in Sag, and this is my favorite one. All after my divorce. My divorce was finalized during the Great Conjunction in December of 2020. That's not a joke. In my divorce, I had 2 dogs. He took one, I kept one. I've kind of talked about that with you guys in the past. Like, we have a good relationship for the dogs. Dogs are our kids. When he left with my pity, my mix, I have a Shar-Pei pit bull mix. Her name is Lacey. She was sad. From her perspective, her daddy came home for the first time in months, took her sister and left. Very heartbroken. She didn't understand. Can't explain it. It's a dog. So I started looking for fosters. I started looking for another alternative. And very long story short, for the next year, I ended up fostering 2 dogs for people that I knew. One was my brother because his class load got really heavy. The other one was my best friend who was going through divorce. We both did divorce stuff nearly at the same timeline. And at the end of a year span, so right as Mars was about to go into Sag, this is how this all happened. Right as Mars went into Sag, she's like, okay, well, we're going to move and I'm going to take her back. And my first words to her, and she can attest to this, was, great, I'm going to start looking for my Shar-Pei. Now, Lacey, my older dog, she's a Shar-Pei pit bull mix. I always could tell, having had more experience with pit bulls before, I'm like, I could tell what parts of her demeanor were pay and what were pity. I could see the differences in her demeanor compared to the others. I'm like, huh. And I loved it. She's a very loving dog, very empathic dog. She's my little healer dog. And I wanted another pay. So I was looking through the rescue groups. I was going through all these little Facebook groups. I was signed up in all of them, all these different rescues. And ultimately, what happened, I had been in those groups for a while. I kept looking. I saw some in Texas. I had seen some in Kansas. I had seen some in Colorado and California and Florida, all of these other areas, but none of them here. No matter what, I was anticipating I'm going to have to make like a 5-hour drive to go somewhere. But I was ready for that. Told my best friend, I'm going to start looking for my Shar-Pei. 24 hours later. 24 hours later, this cute little long hair, which is known as a bear coat Shar-Pei, smush-faced dog came available right here in Oklahoma. I cannot make this up. This happened. His first mommy returned him to the breeder. She got sick. That was her thing. I'm not getting into all that part. Returned him to the breeder. The breeder had actually, he was a part of their last litter. They weren't going to keep doing it, so they listed him on the rehoming groups right here in Oklahoma. That happened on a Monday night. By Friday, he was mine. And that was when Mars hit the South Node. Not a joke. My last Mars South Node conjunction manifested my fur baby. He's everything that I needed. I had done a lot of healing, but I was still struggling with finding the ability to laugh again. He makes me laugh every single day. And because I got him from the breeder, she actually knew his date of birth. He was my dog. He's meant to be my dog. Like I've delineated down that he's a Libra rising. Very Venus ruled. He has Venus conjunct the North Node in Gemini, but he's a Gemini sign and a Gemini sun and a Pisces moon. I am a Gemini sun and a Pisces moon. This is my dog. He makes me laugh every single day, and that is two different ways to see Mars hit the South Node. I have seen massive heartbreaks and loss, but I have also seen the other side where we manifest. Huge manifestation opportunities. And if you look at both spectrums of that, that can still be very Uranian because it is so all over the place. Uranus transits can be as simple as a technology situation, but it can also be something that is complete anarchy and groundbreaking and disheveling. That can also be the South Node. And why am I putting all that together? The last Mars conjunction was with Uranus. The next planetary conjunction will be with Mercury. There are layers to the Mercury aspect. But before all that, at the very beginning of October, and this is going to happen right after Mercury goes through its opposition to Neptune. So that's going to happen October 2nd. Between October 3rd and October 4th, because it's going to last for a good 2 days, Mars is going to hit a conjunction to K2, to the South Node. And I feel like for some people, it's going to be an internal thing that can lead to a very big external trigger, because right after Mars conjoins the South Node, Mars will go into a square with Pluto just within a few days. So I feel like that energy, whenever we get into October, is going to be very triggering. But I also feel like that triggering also requires understanding alignment. In the past, before I actually, went through Dark Night of the Soul stuff and went through the elements of healing and all that, South Node conjunctions were heavy. They sucked. They triggered every type of wound and trauma all the way back to childhood. They created lots of insecurity. Like, it activated lots of insecurity in my marriage and in my business life and things like that. However, after committing to healing, and what's really interesting to me whenever I say Dark Night of the Soul, this is just a quick little, it's a little tangent. I didn't think a spiritual person, somebody who had been spiritual their entire life, could really go through a Dark Night of the Soul, but I learned really fast that we can go through a Dark Night of the Soul. Because when it started to hit, I was like, oh, I know these symptoms. It's not depression. This is weird. And it was super weird. But because I knew what I was doing, because I knew what I was starting to feel, I was understanding that pattern, it made it easier to get through. I know not everybody can say that. I know. But having that ability was very helpful for me. Not trying to brag. But what I found over time is the deeper you go into your healing, the less those South Node conjunctions hurt. And now I want to go into another aspect whenever it does come to the South Node, and that is that spiritual healer level of energy. The more in alignment with where you're meant to be in your soul's path, the more peaceful those South Node conjunctions can be. The more about alignment they can be. If we are no longer leading with our ego, because remember, this is a body with no head, doesn't give a shit about your ego. If we are still stuck in our ego that this is what I want, this is what I will have, and Rahu, gimme, I'm a hungry baby. If we are too leaned into Rahu, those South Node hits hurt. Internally, they hurt. Internally, they trigger. And when we have that Mars South Node conjunction, there will be people that are highly internally triggered. Fears and frustrations and old traumas creating new traumas. there will be huge triggered energy. What I think is interesting is the fact that when Mars goes through that square with Pluto, right afterwards is when it starts to go over some of the activation dates. I'll get to that part here in a minute. Let's stick to the South Node being a healer. Now, whenever it comes to the idea of the healer, there are two aspects that can be tied to the actual healer. One would be Jupiter, but that's usually more like priest and doctor. And then there is the South Node, but this is more like monk, people that take vows of silence, people that no longer look at attachments. They start to minimalize. Very, very much K2 South Node energy. The seer, the healer, the person that likes to get below the surface. It can also be very Plutonian whenever we start to get to this aspect. We like to get below the surface. We like to deal with things from the past, overcome the things from the past. Mystics and sages, the philosophers, but not the ones that want the notoriety and it's in all the books, but the ones that actually just sit and talk about beliefs and hope and philosophy. There can be a peace element to the South Node. And we've already had some precursors letting us know if we are in alignment or not. Those precursors happen these first few times the moon hit conjunctions to the South Node after it went into Libra. If each time the moon has hit the South Node, you have had calm, peaceful energy, then there's alignment there. And when Mars hits the conjunction of the South Node, it should be more about breakthroughs, bright ideas. It could be about surgeries for some people. Surgeries, cutting things off, getting below the surface, trying to figure something out. Can also have to do with scans, because back in the day, the only way that you could find out what was going on below the surface was through cutting. You had to cut somebody open to look. However, now we have more technology there. So I will say, like scans, there can be scans tied to the head and tied to other areas of the body. I'm about to say blood, and I said bloody, whatever. Scans of the body, getting in tune with something tied to the blood, so blood pressure, blood sugars, things like that. There is a medicinal aspect coming, considering we talked about with surgeons, you got to talk about a medicinal aspect. But whenever it comes to the healers, we also need to look at the idea of awakenings. Mars South Node awakenings and discoveries. There will be discoveries of healers, of seers, of intuitives. The next age of medicine women. Now, medicine women, that's going to be more tied to native. And remember, I am native. But for a long time, I was somebody without a path. So I dabbled in everything to find the things that made sense to me. There will be the discovery of new shamans and new medicine women and new medicine men. The need for new healers. There will be people that decide to go to nursing school. They get their CNA, they want to go to get their RN, something like that. And it leads to a new determination once Mars hits the square to Pluto. However, if people are sick and there's something wrong under the surface, that Mars South Node, it can lead to hospital stays. Mars square Pluto can lead to triggers of fear, triggers of power struggles. If something's going wrong in your body, your power struggles with yourself. It's here, like you're struggling with you. There can be things that are tied to the head. There can be things that are below the surface. And Beware of migraines because of the head, Mars and head. It'll be things that we don't anticipate, things that we aren't ready for, things that we are not expecting. We can have breakthroughs, breakups, large fear triggers, stepping away, technological breakthroughs. And considering that also ties into the same timeline as Venus crossing back over her point of shadow. I will show this at the end. I will show the charts and kind of what I'm explaining with the Mars-Neptune square. Considering that will also be like Venus's end of the point of shadow, there will be something about July that comes back up in that time span. So what the time span I'm talking about again, October 3rd to October 8th. October 3rd and 4th, Mars conjunct the South Node. October 7th and 8th is going to be Mars square Pluto. Just kind of a quick reminder where we're at. I know I'm ranting. After the Mars-Pluto square, Mars is then going to go over a whole extra set of activation points. Now in September, I've only been bringing up one, and that has been the Mars rebirth point. And Mars crossed over it throughout the week that we're in. So I'm recording this on September 22nd. Yes, Friday, September 22nd. And the moon is still in Sag right now. It's right in between that moon square Neptune, moon square from the sun time span. Hasn't went into Capricorn quite yet. Although I already know what some of that conversations are going to be once it does go into Capricorn. So that's my personal stuff. There were elements to this week between Monday, the 20, ooh, is that the 19th? Monday the 19th? Let me pull my calendar. 18th. So between the 18th and the 21st, that were also, beyond just the actual transits, there was another activation. Mars's activation. He was completing his cycle from his rebirth. And now everything until the next rebirth that happens in November is going to be a mixed bag. You're going to keep hearing me say mixed bag. Of pivotal actions or chaotic actions. Adding in the idea of the South Node having Uranian qualities. And again, this is not something in a book. This is Dusty making dots. This is Dusty leaning into her intuition and explaining and having a meditative rant about this intuition thing with y'all. And if you decided to listen, that's on you. If we take the idea of that Uranian quality with the South Node and adding in the fact that Mars is going to go over Venus's most recent star point, where she had her rebirth, not the retrograde one, but the one from last year, October 22nd of 2022. And then Mars is going to go into its own sign and go over all of the other transits through Scorpio and the eclipse points that happened in Scorpio. The one that happened in May of 2022, the one and only new moon eclipse, which was in a conjunction to Venus. Good old Venus. What have you done? The new moon conjunct Venus in Scorpio that happened in October, and that one happened right before Mars turned retrograde. So again, there's something from the Mars retrograde that's going to come back up. Themes from the Mars retrograde. Similar themes are going to come back up once Mars goes into Scorpio. And then we had the one eclipse from May of this year. And that coincided with around the time that Pluto turned retrograde. So we have a lot of events and timelines and activation periods that Mars is going to go over all in the next 60 days. Round it out. I'm filming this in September. Mars's rebirth is going to happen in November. I'm just going to round it to 60. Now, in that same 60-day span, we will also start those Mars conjunctions. Now, of course, the sun is going to be the rebirth one. That's its own thing. I'm not getting into that part right now. We will get into that when we get closer to it, because I want to see the things that unfold before we really talk more deeply into what that rebirth is going to be activating for people for the 2-year span that follows from it. Right now, we're in a transition timeline where we are both completing the activations tied to the last rebirth of Mars and preparing us for the next rebirth. Mixed bag, transitional energy. Venus, good old Venus, rules the next eclipse cycle. And the element that I think is amplifying, adding a whole lot of adrenaline, a whole lot of nos, a whole lot of gasoline to the fire, however you want to word it. Venus ruling this eclipse season, coinciding with Mars going over all of its eclipse points, going over Venus's rebirth point in October. This is specific to October now. And then going over all of the eclipse points that happen. That's a lot of energy. Now, when Venus has its first eclipse in Libra, and that's going to happen, where is it at? October 14th. We'll have the new moon in Libra. And then by the end of the month, on October 28th, we will have the full moon in Taurus. We still have to look at the idea that the South Node, this energy that can either be about cutting off, innovation, breakdowns, break up, breakthrough, cuts, surgeries, healers, seers, this very mixed bag energy, adding in the fact that that is going to be the heavier aspect of the Venus ruled eclipses. That too puts in the element of a mixed bag. For a lot of people, the new beginnings are going to include a break, and I've been saying that for weeks. Now I'm putting more emphasis into why I'm saying that. We're going into a timeline where breaks, cuts, cutting off, outgrowing, discarding, the South Node stuff. If we are at peace and we are in alignment, then this can be a very big energy of breakthroughs and creating new levels of determination and putting new personal power into the path. And that can happen between Mars's conjunction to South Node and Mars's square to Pluto. I feel like for a lot of people, the elements of how good or bad eclipse season is going to be, we really get a glimpse of it in those few days between October 4th and October 8th. Sorry, I'm blank for a second. The other thing that's going to happen in those few days, Mercury is going to go into Libra. Venus is going to go into Virgo. Sorry, I'm blank for a second. Now I want to add layers, more layers, to parts of eclipse season. In the last eclipse season, there was a Mercury retrograde in Taurus while Venus was in Gemini. We had mutual reception during that eclipse season. For the first half of this eclipse season, we will have the same thing. We will have Venus in Virgo and Mercury going through Libra. Now, that mutual reception will not last as long. It won't last like a full month like it did before. No, it's going to only be about 2 weeks. But the majority of Libra season, Venus is in mutual reception with something. The first half, Venus is in mutual reception with the Sun. So the things that are coming to light once Libra season starts makes us very, very aware of other elements tied to the Venus retrograde that we did not know. The elements, the awareness, the things that come to light, sun, light, come to light, are going to impact the way we think about something. So we got some head stuff in here too. The logical brain is going to impact the way we think about things. Mercury is going to go into Libra. By the time Mercury goes into Libra, that's also whenever the Pluto-Mars square is happening. There is going to be a shift in our knowledge. Our awareness is going to change. Once Venus goes into Virgo, the critical aspects of how we need to continue, the structure that needs to be done, the methodology that needs to be built, the chronological aspects of understanding where something went wrong and how it led to this, like having your facts straight is going to be really important. Because for a while, Venus is going to have to put some things in a whole different type of order. And the thing is, Venus doesn't like Virgo. She's not as good in Virgo. She's much happier in, Pisces and Cancer. She's like, oh, it's free. I can do whatever I want. Virgo's like, no. Here is your schedule. You can have free time on Sunday at 4 p.m. Until then, we got shit to do. Very much about order. Creating order. More forms of communication being discovered and being found. More information that has been below the surface being uncovered and being found. Other things that have been below the surface. Now, this is going to get very specific again, but I have been literally seeing this one set of images in my visions, and I don't know who this applies to, so I've been starting to bring this up in the podcast because I feel like somebody's going to finally tell me soon. Unearthing. There has been times over the last few years with like Pluto going through Capricorn where mass graves have been found. In Canada, it was very big in regards to like the schools. I want to say there was also some in Minnesota, North Dakota. In Oklahoma, we had the Tulsa Race Massacre, and there was literally mass graves that are being dug up right now because they're trying to date and trying to make sure that that's what exactly that they have. Because for decades, the city of Tulsa and the people that live here have said that, oh no, that didn't happen. But it did. And they're literally going through the process of unearthing those mass graves. I keep specifically seeing like red dirt and rock and dust. It's very dry. So more than likely whatever is getting unearthed, like it's not local to me. It's very, very red. It kind of reminds me whenever I was in Arizona. I'm not Arizona, when I went to Nevada. That's what I keep. It's like seeing the sides of like the rock formation and the sediment and everything. Like I'm seeing that. Something getting unearthed. Something like desert and unearthed. Unmarked graves. I know that seems very specific. I feel like that's going to be something that comes through too. There's a lot of things that are going to come through in eclipse season. A lot of it's going to be very, very heavy. A lot of it's going to be very, very triggering. A lot of it is going to, again, push people into alignment. But the thing is, some of us do not like the idea of change. We have been stuck and we have been stubborn. We have not been willing to accept change. And if you have not looked at the synchronicities and looked at the patterns and leaned into those, the way the universe has been putting them in front of us, these next few months are going to hit a lot harder than they needed to. And this is more forewarning in that regard. When I've meditated on the South Node transits, the South Node ruled eclipse tied with Venus, I feel like we're going to see both. This is a transitional eclipse season because we have energies tied to both new beginnings and endings. New ways of doing things and outgrowing. New life, new homes, but that new home meant leaving your family home, leaving family behind. So you can have that new part of your life for however long that cycle needs to be, because it's always in cycles. Knowing that and understanding that is going to be a big aid in people and how they mentally process and handle what happens next, because there's going to be a lot of emotion. There's going to be a lot of energy. And it's very, very rapid, even if it doesn't immediately become recognizable in the rapid. And what I mean by that is when Mars goes over those activation points of like Venus's rebirth at 29 degrees of Libra, and then all 3 eclipse points that happened in Scorpio, there might not be an actual transit to Mars when it goes over that point, but that doesn't mean that the activation wasn't there. And depending on how far away from alignment you were or how close you were throughout like the last eclipse season will kind of dictate where we go in this next one. And again, if you are resistant to change, it's going to force you to make some changes. You'll get to the point that you're just sitting there and you're trying to work on the keyboard, but you're so... I've been there. It is the energy and the universe telling you, this isn't for you anymore. This isn't serving your higher purpose anymore. You need to do something else. And there'll be a lot of that in eclipse season. Whether that's in the job aspect, whether that's in the schooling aspect, whether that is in the starting of a business, whether that is breaking away from being independent, marriages, relationships, whether that is in regards to like being a parent. Some people are just gonna be like dead set, like, no, we're going in vitro. We're going to a fertility clinic, like that type of thing, like, because we know something is wrong below the surface. And we need to see it. There will be a lot of below the surface things that need to be dealt with. After we get through this, a transitional eclipse season, which again feels very, very rapid. There will be parts of October, like I have one area in my notes for October that we have just a bunch of transits that are happening all at once in like a week span that's going to be very hectic. And that's going to include Mars in Scorpio. So again, we've got a lot of hectic things, a lot of hectic energy. Mars will go over the Venus rebirth point. Mars will going over the eclipse. I'm just going over my notes. Because this was originally supposed to be like 2 different episodes, and I didn't do that. The other thing I didn't really cover with the South Node is in Vedic astrology, they include the maternal grandfather and paternal, so grandmother, so like dad's mom, mom's dad. I don't like doing that so much because so many people have blended families nowadays that I just say elders a lot of the time. You guys will have heard me say that in episodes, like I'm like, there's things with elders. Considering after the Mars-Pluto square, Pluto will turn direct, and Pluto's in the sign of Capricorn. I'm adding more layers to shit. And throughout eclipse season, we start eclipse season, Pluto turning direct. So like literally, Pluto turns direct on the 10th of October. Eclipse season starts the 14th. And I rule eclipse season the way my rule is the entire lunar month. So the first eclipse is going to be the new moon in Libra. So I go new moon to new moon. That's eclipse season. To me, eclipse season will not end until we get to the new moon in Scorpio. And that's going to happen way later. That coincides with the Mars rebirth timeline. That's not a joke. So, rapid transitional energy, disruptions to other fixed areas of life, but they will be similar themes to things we've already dealt with. Themes from last fall. For some people, it'll be taking things from last fall and we're just adding the next layer to it. I think of like the FTX scandal and like the guy that got caught with, commingling all the funds and basically like the massive Ponzi scheme aspect of that. The court dates might be getting set in eclipse season. There might actually be some quartz stuff in eclipse season. I don't really know. I haven't followed in a while. Haven't had a need to. But that's what I mean by the next layers. You started something in your routine and now you're going to, you started yoga a year ago. This is a very basic, mundane example. You started yoga a year ago and now you feel like you're about ready to start taking instructor classes. The next layer. So, things below the surface, elders, South Node with elders, but then also the Pluto-Saturn aspects, because Pluto will turn direct at the beginning of October, at the beginning of November, after the full moon eclipse in Scorpio, Saturn will turn direct. And Saturn will be turning direct at 0 degrees of Pisces, meaning for a lot of us, things that we started in March, February, March timeframe, we're coming back to in November, but we're either coming back to it with new information, we're taking an existing thing we've been working on the entire time, we're taking it to the next level. We feel like we can level it up. In some ways, we're starting something all over again because the person we were trying to do it with didn't fit the mix. And that's some of the stuff that gets revealed throughout eclipse season. Because again, things below the surface. Okay. Let's do the chart. We'll do chart stuff really fast. And then I will be done with this rant for the day. Let's do this. So the first date I've got up August 1st of 2022, and this is the first date that I started to get into. This is the Mars-Uranus North Node conjunction that happened. So this was the last planetary conjunction of Mars. It just happened to include the North Node, but it was Mars and Uranus. This happened August 1st, August 2nd. By August 3rd, it was separating. But here is the first one. I'm going to keep bumping this. I'm going to get to the end of October. October 30th, Mars has just turned retrograde. And where is Mercury? Newly in Scorpio, just like I said. Brand new in Scorpio. Right there. Right there. This happened right after the eclipse. That eclipse was a few days earlier, so that'll let us see one of the eclipse dates, because I didn't write this part down. Happens at 1 degree. Well, that's fun. Moving this by hour. Get there. There you go. So there's that. October 25th of 2022, 1 degree of Scorpio. So great, we get our first eclipse point right at the beginning. Yay! Now I'm going to again remind everybody, October 25th, this was the very first and only new moon eclipse in Scorpio. The energy tied to that new moon was meant to be very, very profound. We've had multiple full moon eclipses in Taurus. We had an out of sign eclipse in 2021, November 18th, 19th of 2021. I said that in some of the previous episodes, so I'm not going to go back on that for this part. We had an out of sign eclipse in Taurus. Then we had the new moon eclipse in Taurus that happened in the spring of 2020, in April of 2022. This was the only new moon eclipse. So there's something very profound to that first few degrees. We'll say 0 to 2. So if you have planets here, which is funny because my ascendant was right here where this new moon was. I'm a 1 degree Scorpio rising. So yay me. Anyways, I'm really not nervous about it. But there's that new moon. And again, it was in a conjunction to Venus. I say all that because Venus rules the next eclipse season. Okay. Mars did everything that it was going to do in the retrograde. You can still see it at that 25 degree mark. We will bump this to, what's the next one? Let's get to that Sag full moon. And that happened, it's about 2 days past. I can't type in dates in this system. So depending on your time zone, For me, this was like late on June 3rd. So right here on the calendar, I have it at June 4th, 5:45 a.m. Central Standard Time. The moon's just a few hours past. So the full moon has just perfected on June 4th, but right here, right on this other side, Mercury and Uranus. Again, the last planetary conjunction that Mars made, planetary conjunction, so not the South Node and not the moon, was Uranus. The first planetary conjunction that we will get into in October will be Mercury. There are things from that Sagittarius full moon, Easter egg energy, there were things that we seeded that will start to come to harvest throughout the Mercury-Mars conjunctions. There's something from June that starts to come back around. And I've said this before in a whole other way. Now here's another layer of it. Okay. There was that one. I'm going to take this now to go back. I want to start Venus. Her retrograde bullshit. That's still how I feel about it. Okay. This is at 5:45 a.m. Central Standard Time. There's no reason I have this specific time up. Because I'm doing this one episode a little bit differently, I have no problem with jumping around a little bit more on the transits. And I'm going to show you this activation because I feel like this plays into another thing that's going to happen in October. So at the start of Venus retrograde, we had Pluto opposite the sun squaring the nodes. If you listened to me back then, I said this looks like a target. I said then this is an activation. This is a whole ass activation point. 29 degrees. Hey, where was Venus's rebirth point? 29 degrees. Right there. There is something about the 29-degree mark for the cardinal signs for the next 18 months from when this cycle started. This again, the nodes went into the nodes went into Aries and Libra July 17th. So there's something very, very specific to the 29-degree mark for the cardinal signs for this 18-month eclipse axis of Libra and Aries. And I'm going to remind everybody again, we started this eclipse axis in a Venus retrograde. We will end it in a Mars retrograde. This is a very powerful, powerful eclipse axis timeline based off that alone. We started in a Venus retrograde. We will end it in a Mars retrograde. Okay. So there's the July 22nd. Put a pin in this part because this is going to come back around when we get to October 7th. We're going to bump this forward. I want to get to that first. So this is this week. Mars was going over its activation point. This is 2 days ago. Bump this forward. We get to, this is October 4th. Mercury's in its last little bit of Virgo. It just made an opposition to Neptune. It's going to make the trine to Pluto, and then it's going to go into Libra. There's some type of difference in our mindset and in our knowledge in regards to Venus's stuff and everything that the Venus-activated people in our lives have been doing. There is a shift in our awareness and in our knowledge. Mercury is going to go into Libra. For a few days, there won't be anything in Virgo, just for a few. Venus will actually enter Virgo very, very late on October 8th. So right as we get into the next little shindig transit that I want to talk about, and that is right here. I bumped this by hour now. Okay. This is October 7th, 1:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. So we're getting into the future dates now. Some of the previous stuff that we're now going to bring to the future. This particular date takes me energetically, mentally back to the start of Venus retrograde. Why? Because Venus turned retrograde at 28 degrees. At this exact minute of perfection, Venus has just passed her point of shadow. Venus is finally wrapping up her walk of shame right here. But what duplicates? The moon opposite Pluto. What happened back at the July 22nd? The sun was opposite Pluto. There's an activation towards the nodes at this time because Mars just went over the south node. So there is the Mars south node piece that happens the 3rd and the 4th, right as Mercury is going into Libra. So we get a few days of like shock to the system, to whatever extent that's going to be. And then we have this energy here. We talked to somebody, we were doing something right before Venus turned retrograde, but we needed Venus to show her ass. We needed that timeline to set some things straight, to correct some stories, to put some things in motion. This puts a new emphasis back into it. And 3 days after this, 3 days, Pluto will turn direct. So again, late on October 8th. So for me, it is 8:11 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's the exact. That's when Venus is going to go into Virgo. When Venus goes into Virgo, that's when we start to enter mutual reception. That's when more knowledge starts to come through, more awareness of certain things will start to come through. We will switch from Venus and the Sun being in mutual reception to Venus and Mercury being in mutual reception. I think it's very interesting that that happens as the Sun is going over Mars's rebirth point. How look at that. Can't make that up. That's right there in front of you. You guys seen it too. Not making up anything. So there's something very specific to this. And then immediately afterwards, Venus is going to start her opposition to Saturn. So again, there's going to be a lot of things tied to authority and elders and things that need to transition. People that have been in authority, that have been abusing power, they're going to get called out. More of that stuff is going to come to the surface. That's going to be a part of the Mars-Pluto square, because right afterwards, Pluto will turn direct. We are going to challenge the authority. We're going to challenge people about what they've been saying and what they've been doing and how they've been moving and where things have been going. There's going to be a challenge. That challenge leads to Pluto's turnaround. That happens very late on the 10th. So I think for me, did I write that one down? No, I didn't. Right after Venus hits the opposition to Saturn, Saturn will hit 0 degrees and will start to station. And Pluto will turn direct. So this is going to happen later in the evening. I want to say this is around 8:30 also. Yes. Overnight. So that's 8:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. Pluto will turn direct. And where's Mars? At Venus's activation point. Turnaround. Activation. Venus hit this opposition to Saturn. So we have a physical actual transit and internal activations. Turnarounds in regards to powers and abuses of power. Between October 10th and November 4th, there will be very big turnarounds in regards to elders and in regards to authority figures. So the people that have not been doing what they were supposed to be doing, this ain't going to be a fun time for them. Challenges and tests are coming. Okay. So there was that one. I'm going to bump this forward. Mars will go into Scorpio October 12th. And then Mars is going to also go immediately over those fun little activation points. So that from the eclipse. So there's that. And now I want to get into... I'm not going to get too into the monthly dates. I just want to kind of go over the things that I mainly talked about in this video. And that was... Here's the next one, October 28th. This happens to be the full moon eclipse the out of sign eclipse that's going to happen in Taurus. Oh, look, another out of sign eclipse. I maintain there's something about this out of sign eclipse that closes out the cycle that was activated in October of 2021. I maintain that. I have felt that since the first time I seen it. That happened when the nodes were still going through Gemini and Sagittarius. That happened right as Venus was entering her shadow for the Capricorn retrograde that happened December of 2021 going into January of 2022. Just to be clear. So here's this next level of activations. And here's where we start the first Mercury-Mars conjunction. Now again, this is happening opposite Jupiter. What came to me during that Sagittarius full moon? Mars conjunctions. And this is happening opposite Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius. The next conjunction that will happen 2 months later in Sagittarius. In Sagittarius, right as Jupiter is stationing to go direct. We have this Mars-Mercury conjunction while Mercury is retrograde. This creates another level of disruption. Whether it's pivotal or chaotic, it all comes down to your own personal things, but there is a harsh conversation. There's disruptive energy. This will not be a good time for travel. That is for damn sure. And it's holiday time, so it's not going to be, it will really not be a good time for travel. There will be inflated stories and things that we need to cut some bullshit on because Mercury is going to be in Sag. There's nothing wrong with Mercury and Sag in like per se, like if you have your natal placement there. However, Mercury is debilitated in Jupiter signs. It struggles. People that have their natal Mercuries in Sagittarius or in Pisces tend to struggle. They struggle with, focus. They struggle with ADHD. Mercury likes to do things very, very fast. And Jupiter's like, no, we're going to take a whole year in every sign. That's a very conflicted energy to have in your head. I want to do everything fast and now. And then the other side of you is going, nah. You can't focus. People struggle with like ADHD and ADD and stuff like that. When it comes to their natal Mercury's in Sag. But with this retrograde one, there's going to be some disruptions. Hellacious disruptions right there. And then the next one's literally a month later, January 26th and 27th, and you can see it right here, Mercury and Mars. And this happens right after Pluto goes into Aquarius. Pluto goes back to 0 degrees of Aquarius. So there will be parts of the Mercury-Mars conjunctions that lead to Jupiter's turnaround that allow for seeds that have been planted from earlier this year in 2023 to play out. And it's going to bring new things to the surface. And it is going to aid in the transition of Pluto being able to do more things in Aquarius. Whatever Pluto in Aquarius means for you. Everybody's in kind of different places. Okay. Did I have any other dates? I don't think so. I think I covered everything that we kind of talked about in my little tangent rant thing. Anyways, okay. Like I said, I was going to put this into the month ahead forecast, and, I didn't cover everything that I wanted to cover, and I took up over half of the video doing it. So I figured I'll make 2 separate videos this time. The next one I do will actually be the major transit dates of October, and I'll put more emphasis on the exact dates and all the way through. I just won't do this whole tangent of the South Node and Mars and all that. I will say in that video to go back and watch this one for better explanations. So I hope this helps. if you guys are in your own meditation and you're feeling the angst and the anxiety aspects of what's going on, I'm kind of curious on what is coming through in your guys' meditation, what you're getting sensations of, what you feel like you're on the cusp of getting towards and doing. Be very interested to know all of that, because you might be picking up different things. And for some of you, you might just be picking up on your own stuff. For some of you, you might be picking up on the energetic pattern that's coming through. But no matter how I'm looking at it, there was something about that quality that kept feeling Uranian, and I meant that. It felt very, very much like it was a hot mess. And Uranus's energy can be very much a hot mess, because it can do so many different things in regards to communication, and so many different things in regards to technology. And there's just so much to it. And whenever I was meditating on some of the upcoming South Node transits, that fell into it. It felt Uranian. And I literally spent part of yesterday going back through old books and listening to audio things, trying to find the connection as to why I felt that way. And there is one Vedic astrologer that I do like to listen to on occasion, and I will link one of his K2 South Node videos in the description, just so if people want to go listen to him, it doesn't hurt my feelings. It's just more knowledge. My calling that I felt like I've been needing to do for a long time is to help people understand more things in regards to knowledge. There's a coach aspect that I like to do with people, and I feel like that's helpful for a lot. Having someone you can bounce ideas off of and bounce information off of, like, hey, have you heard this before? I've been dreaming about this weird thing, whatever it is. That's what I get used to people messaging me about anyways. So that's the kind of stuff that I feel like is going on. I feel like is a part of the upcoming timelines and the upcoming energy. There is a rapid Uranian quality, good, bad, and ugly, on a lot of different levels. There will be gains and losses in this eclipse season. This is not necessarily a direct video about eclipse season. It's actually more about just the South Node and Mars, because I feel like they are doing additional layers. So if you're having a real vibing Venusian eclipse turnaround, but then you got Mars going over here messing with other areas, you might be vibing, but then all of a sudden you got all your old exes over here calling you at the same time. No, it's not a Mercury retrograde thing, but I'm just using this as an example. You got a bunch of old clients and old friends that are trying to come back and do business with you, but you don't even do that business anymore. Like, I still get calls with home building questions and real estate questions. I'm not kidding. I'm like, I've been gone for a couple of years, right? It's like, but are you gonna answer my question? I'm like, yeah, it's not a problem. It happens. Oh, all right. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for letting me rant. I hope this is helpful for some of you. I look forward to any feedback that you guys are having in your own meditation, in your own dreams, in your own downloads. And if we can all kind of like voice those different things, it allows for everybody to figure out things that are meant to be helpful for them moving forward. So again, I love and appreciate every single one of you. I will talk to everybody very, very soon, and subscribe.